You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org. Forno Bravo produces the world's finest modular and assembled pizza ovens. Since 2003, Forno Bravo has provided beautiful and well-made wood and gas-fired brick ovens to homes, outdoor kitchens, restaurants, and mobile businesses around the world. Forno's ovens stretch from basic to professional models, cast refractory, steel, and brick cores, modular kits, and fully assembled ovens to meet any requirement, as well as custom tile patterns, colors, logos, and exterior shapes. Emphasizing variety as well as quality and craftsmanship, Forno Bravo creates the perfect aesthetic for your space as well as solid technology. After thousands of satisfied customers, Forno Bravo is just getting started. Learn more about their products at fornobravo.com.
Today's program is brought to you by Korin, a supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. Korin is proud of their Japanese culture and traditions, but they want you to know that their products are not just for Japanese restaurants. Their knives and tableware bring out the best qualities of food from every culture and fit into every restaurant from French to Pan-Asian to American. And that is why they're located in New York City, where people from every country in the world come to eat. Korin's Tribeca showroom is home to the most extensive collection of Japanese chef knives in the world, including Japan. Stop by to view their exquisitely designed tableware and the rarest natural sharpening stones. They have a whole range of knife services from repair and rust removal to reshaping and realigning. Korin is dedicated to this ideal, bringing the highest quality Japanese design to your table so you can experience the unparalleled quality of Japanese craftsmanship in your home or restaurant. For more information, visit Korin.com.
Welcome to Pizza Quest. I'm Peter Reinhardt, and I am here with a guy who I haven't seen in about 55 years since we went to elementary school, junior high school, and high school together. Ron Costello, who is the author of a whole series of books, which we're going to find out about. But Ron, I'm telling you, I just finished the second of the two books about Belmont Hills, the town where you grew up, which was
the Hill.
Yeah, the Hill, 1 mile from me. I lived on the dividing line, on the other side of the dividing line between Belmont Hills and Penn Valley, and you were one class ahead of me throughout our time. What I do remember about you is that you were a serious baseball player, as were many of the kids on the Hill. And I remember you, I was trying to think, I knew some of the players, but what position did you play? And it came to me, you were the catcher. And then in the second book, the one I'm just finishing now, Insomnia, being a catcher on the baseball team plays a prominent role in this story. Mm-hmm. So help our viewers and listeners catch up a little bit on your story. How did you go from being a kid on the Hill, which is basically, a working class neighborhood with what we considered on the Penn Valley side, the tough kids, how did you go from being one of the guys on the Hill to an author of now 5-6 books?
Yeah. Well, I always had an imagination. Belmont Hills, if you know a little bit about it, it has woodlots, it has streams, it has fields. Unlike the city, Manayunk or Roxbury, there's a lot of space between the homes. And for me growing up, it was a way to express my imagination. For example, with 3 of my closest friends who were all in the books.
Yeah. And by the way, all the characters in the book are real people. Which is real people. As I'm reading the book, I'm having flashbacks to my youth.
Yeah.
Real people, but in imaginative situations.
Exactly. And I invented a game of baseball, where you had a board. I made everything up myself. And you rolled six dice. You rolled dice. And that determines whether you got a hit or made an out. And you move the players around the bases. Uh-huh. And it was a great game. And we played an entire summer in Gary Petke's backyard. We played this game. I made up 3x5 cards, which was like a baseball card with your averages. Uh-huh. And the dice, how successful you were depended on whether the guy was a good hitter or not. Anyway,
You were ahead of
other-
all these games that are out now, the video games and all, which have all these logarithms. You had created a dice version of that.
right. I invented games of war in the woods that we played, setting two guys out into the woods, and a pack of 10 would be after them, and there were certain rules in there. So I had all of these things. And then Peter, I should tell you, at Harriton, I wasn't a great student, but I started to realize I liked to write. So in English, in senior year, I wrote this composition where the guy hits the ball and it's in the gap. And as he's running around the bases, he's reviewing his life.
Oh,
So we get our papers back, and I get it back and I got a C. So I go up to the teacher. I can't remember his name. I go up to the teacher and I said,
was it a guy, a male teacher?
It was a male. He was young.
Young. I had a woman teacher. When the Harriton you're referring to is the high school that we went to, Harriton High School in Rosemont, Pennsylvania, near Villanova. Yeah.
And there was Mr. Tier. I don't know.
Mr. Tier, yeah. And he was the head of the
lower kids. He taught the lower kids. Like, and I was on all his classes. So anyway, I said, "What do you mean?" Of course, I wrote this. So I had a girlfriend named Linda, and she proofed it for me. So by the end of the day, I brought her in, and she said, "Ron absolutely wrote this. You have to give him the grade he deserves." And I got an A+.
So basically, he downgraded you because he thought you hadn't written it. That
he thought there was no way Ronnie Costello could write this paper.
Because it was way better than anything you'd ever shown him before.
Way better. Now, I didn't mess around like a lot of kids. Well, I sort of did. You know, I was an instigator, and we drove Mr. Tier crazy.
He was also the sponsor of the high school newspaper, of which the year after you graduated, I became the editor of the newspaper. So I worked directly under Mr. Tier. He was our sponsor, but he was pretty hands off. He let us just kind of do it.
Well, poor Mr. Tier, because he had this huge class of kids, mostly boys, but there were some girls, of kids from the Hill and Bryn Mawr. And all they wanted to do was fool around.
Yeah.
And there were some very imaginative ways of how we got to Mr. Tier. And one day, he gave the whole class detention. And Skippy Mitros, I don't know if you remember.
I remember Skip. Yeah, I remember Skippy. Yeah.
He and two of his friends, we had baseball practice, so we didn't want to go to school detention. Well, they dressed up like us and went into the class. And when he took the roll, yeah, they'd say, and we got away with that. He was elderly, Mr. Tier.
Yeah.
So he wasn't the sharpest light bulb in the closet, but he was a nice man.
Easy prey.
Yeah. So, you know, and then I worked my way up in a company as an outdoor salesman. And then I met.
Wait, before you go on to that part of it, I just want to go back to this moment. This is sort of like a pivotal moment for you, because I had a very similar moment in a couple of years earlier when I turned in a paper that the teacher was, I've been fooling around and I haven't been doing that good. And suddenly I got an idea for a story, and the teacher, he said, "Wow, this is unexpected coming from you." And that when she said, "This is unexpected and I'd like to see more of this," it changed my life. And it sounds like when you got that A+ and you realized, wait a minute, I can do this.
Yeah.
That's got to have been a light bulb moment.
Well, yeah, then, you know, I graduated from Harriton, didn't go to college, worked my way up in a company. And in 1970, I met my future wife, Denise. And I always wanted to be a teacher and coach. So she said, "Let's get married," or we said, maybe, "Let's get married, find a college to go to, and you can work a little bit and I'll work, and you can teach and coach." So we did. We went up to Mansfield, Pennsylvania, which is way up in the boondocks, top of Pennsylvania. It's one of 14 state schools. like Millersville, Westchester, Mansfield.
Mansfield, yeah.
So she graduated from Holy Family College with a degree in elementary education. So, but for first 2 years, we lived in the North Hall women's dormitory, and Denise was like head resident of the dormitory.
Uh-huh.
I didn't like just going to school. So I started writing for a local paper in Wellsboro, a column called My Mansfield. And then after I got a little bit of taste of that, one afternoon, I drove up to Elmira, New York, which is 30 miles north of Mansfield, just over the New York border. And I found the Elmira Star-Gazette, which was a Gannett-owned newspaper. And I walked in to the receptionist. I said, "Do you know if there are any part-time jobs here?" Oh, no, sir. No, sir. And okay. So I was ready to leave. She says, "Wait a minute. Let me call upstairs." So she called upstairs to the newsroom, and the sports editor, Al Malott, came down, met me, took me up in the newsroom, sat me down in front of a typewriter and said, write a make-up story of the Phillies and the Mets in the World Series. Well, I was right up my alley.
Perfect.
He comes over a little while later and says, "What are you writing, the Magna Carta? Let me see that." And so he hired me. And I would drive up to the Star-Gazette around 5 o'clock after all the classes were done.
Yeah.
And I would sit in front of a desk with a typewriter and a telephone, and local coaches would call in. And I'd pick up the Star-Gazette, and it would maybe be the coach of Athens or Sayre or all those schools up along that northern tier reporting their night's basketball game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So I would do a little 1 or 2 paragraph. Sayre topped Athens in hoops. I learned how to write these little things. So one time, coach calls in and I said, "Coach, let me ask you something." I was like so fascinated about these big farms because I grew up on a hill. I said, "Do you have any of your kids that live on a farm?" He said, "Oh yeah, we have. Well, our center has one of the biggest dairy farms. His mom and dad own the biggest dairy farm in Cuyahoga County." So I said to him, "Well, would you mind if I came by and did a story on it?" "Well, let me ask." And he got back to me the next night, and I drove over to the farm on my own time. Paper didn't know about this. Took a couple photos, did a story, and when I gave it to the paper, it ended up on the front page. Wow. So that was cool. I really liked it.
A big break.
So one day, the sports writer calls me at home and he says, "Do you have a tie?" And I said, Yeah, why?" "Wear it. Be here an hour early." "Well, what's going on?" "You'll find out when you get here." So, I had no idea. Went in there, and he took me into a meeting with the manager, editor, and the editor, and they offered me a job. They said, "We'd like you to take over the regional reporter position in Cuyahoga County. You would cover Mansfield and Wellsboro, accidents, borough council meetings, feature stories." I can't do that. I'm a student. I'm not going to quit school. I'm like into my second year now, and that's okay. We'll let you do both.
Wow.
I was the only person that ever did that, was a full-time reporter and a full-time student. And Peter, I love that job. I still say today it was the best job I ever had.
Yeah. Great training. Holy cow.
I did feature stories. I'd go to a borough council meeting and they'd be passing an ordinance about street signs. It was very boring. And I would do 2 side stories to make it fun. And the paper would print all of them.
So you had like these sidebars going in.
Yeah.
It sounds like you had a natural instinct for journalistic writing too.
Creative. I maybe wasn't that good of a writer, and I'm not today, but I could tell a story and I'm creative.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually it came time for me to student teach. So I'm in the educational program to teach and coach. And I went in and quit at the newspaper. Oh, they were so ticked off. We gave you this job. You're doing so well. You're leaving? Yes. because we came to Mansfield. I'm not quitting school. I have to student teach, and that's full time. So I quit and I student taught and I graduated. My wife was teaching elementary school now. And I got a job right there as a teacher in Mansfield High School.
Mhm.
And I taught senior electives, started a newspaper, which I will tell you won the Keystone Award at Penn State for the best high school newspaper in Pennsylvania.
Wow, that's great.
I had Ivy League kids. See, Mansfield is a farm town, but the college is there.
Yeah.
So all the professors have children, and professors are educated and they're smart, and so are their kids. And so I recruited them for the newspaper called the Mansfield Independent. And so I taught for 5 years, and we adopted our first child, and Denise, we adopted our first child at a Catholic place in Scranton, and Denise agreed with the nuns to leave her teaching job and work full time with the child. That cut our salary in half, more than half. So I went looking for other positions in the area, and my alma mater, Mansfield, hired me as alumni director. And I was so creative in that role. I created the Athletic Hall of Fame. I created the Society of Honors. I created all this stuff. And I was there 6 years before Penn State found me. And I worked with the president to create a fundraising program. Mansfield never had one. And I just, again, used my creativity and read about it. And so Penn State contacted me and said, we'd like you to come down. We want to talk to you. And so I got hired at Penn State in the College of Agriculture Sciences, the chief development officer. what wonderful people.
Wow.
Wonderful job.
What a swing. So did you move to State Park at all?
Yeah, we lived in State College. We lived there for 3 years until Philadelphia Textiles president offered me a whole pile of money in a car to come down there and be his vice president.
No kidding. Wow.
So I left Penn State and went there.
Which is basically back not too far from where you grew up. It's like a few miles from the hill.
Yeah, well, that's correct.
Textile, yeah.
In fact, we bought my family's home and we renovated it. An old buddy of mine, Ralph DiGiovanti, did the renovation. Anyway, we were there a year and a half, and I got a call from Penn State. Dave Gerhardt called me. He was vice president for university relations, and he says to me, I understand you're not real happy down there. That's okay. Would you like to come back to Penn State?
Oh, my God.
I said, let me ask Denise. So we talked about it that night. Next morning, I called him and says, yeah, I'll come back. So I went back to Penn State for another 7 years. And then I went here and I went there, and it was all after more money. We had 3 children.
Yeah, sure.
Denise was a teacher in State College, and we had a really nice life, nice home in State College. And I had the largest garden in the borough, vegetable garden. And, but then I went to the University of Illinois and didn't like that. And that was the worst mistake I ever made. I moved my family out there. And my daughter, Jennifer, who was high school age at this time, said, Dad, this place reminds me of the shore. It's so flat. I keep looking for the beach. And it was so different than the Philadelphia and East Coast.
Yeah.
So I went back. Temple hired me, worked at Temple for 10 years, worked at Drexel, and retired at Drexel. And my last couple of years at Drexel, I wrote this book, which you haven't seen on my site, called The Junto, Racing to the Bell, which I later changed to Charter School General, which I later changed to Catholic School General. And it was about a young Black kid growing up poor in the city of Philadelphia who could exchange mind messages with animals. And that's not so far out of the possibilities, because they're doing studies today of how people can have ESP with animals and vice versa. Your dog looks up at you and knows he wants you to take him for a walk or something. All right. Well, this kid can talk. He goes to the zoo, and the elephant calls him to the zoo, and the elephant tells him terrorists are coming in and they're going to steal the Liberty Bell. So Jamil saved the Liberty Bell he snuck the animals out the zoo at night.
Now, how old were you when you wrote this book?
I was pretty close to retirement. I was probably 62, 63.
Oh, so was this the first novel? So
first shot, first novel.
Yeah, so this was the first one out of the chute.
Right, and I made a huge amount of mistakes in it. But you know what? I have it on Amazon now, so you could go on Amazon and do Catholic School General or Charter Schools, and you'll see it. And I really liked the book. It's just I just liked it. And someday I am going to bring the book back and maybe offer it for people who buy the 5-book series when it becomes 5 books. And then the next thing I did is I was a history teacher and I was real interested in history. And I wrote a book about Columbus's first journey in 1492.
Right.
Called Darkness They Could Not See.
Yes, and I've seen that, and I read the synopsis on the website of that one.
So Columbus isn't real popular today in America. He's accused of genocide. He's accused of running slaves and all this. Well, let me tell you, I researched for 2 years before I wrote a word. And so I became very familiar on just his first voyage. And the story was that right there at 1492, Europe was going through hunger, starvation, and 4 hoodlums, 4 guys, stuck on the ship to stuff themselves from the stuff they put down in the base of the ship for the voyage and eat like kings. What they didn't realize was the ship was going out to America, to the New World. And so everybody escaped, got caught by the guards, except one who stayed in the hull of the ship, and he went on the voyage.
Okay, so wait, stop there so this part of the story, this is the imaginative part, or is there some reality? Was there an actual stowaway like this that this is based on, or did you create this character out of thin air?
I created the character.
Okay. All right, so you created you got a historical situation and planted in some fictional characters to go on an adventure,
right? And
which has kind of become sort of the trademark of your style, then, as your other books unfold.
Well, today it's called historic fiction. Fiction. But everything about Columbus, the ship, the men, the voyage, the landing, is all real. So there are 3 people in the book, 3 voices. It's not easy to do, to write a book with 3 voices. One is Pedro, who snuck on the ship and got caught. And Columbus, he was smart, so Columbus made him his cabin boy. There was the Taína. The Taínos were the indigenous people of the Caribbean when Columbus arrived. And they disappeared from the face of the earth because of the Spanish, not because of Columbus. See, a lot of people think Columbus killed them all. No. It was the Spaniards who came after Columbus brought. Yeah. Okay, so here's an interesting fact. Columbus went with 3 ships. His next voyage took 15 ships. Okay, he took horses, he took soldiers, he took farmers, everybody. All Columbus was a stagecoach driver.
He was the one who opened the gate, basically.
Now, in the first voyage, he did take 7 Taínos back because Queen Elizabeth and King Ferdinand. Queen Elizabeth says, "Are there people we can convert to Christianity?" And Columbus brought them back, not to be slaves, but to be converted.
Okay. Is this Queen? Are we talking about Queen Isabella? Or Queen Isabella? Okay.
Queen Isabella. Like I said, Elizabeth. No, it's Queen Isabella. Yeah. So all 3, the cabin boy, the Taíno native woman, and Columbus himself tell the story.
So
All,
go ahead. Go
all
ahead.
the way through to the end. So that's it. And I thought it was very creative. I think it sticks with the only written material they have about his first voyage is a log he kept on ship. And I memorized that log. You can go on and buy it in a book form now. That's the only thing. This is 500 years ago. There was no reporters around or novelists to write the story. That's the only thing. So I memorized. I memorized how he used the North Star. I memorized how he used Dead Reckoning. He was brilliant. He was brilliant and he was courageous. A wonderful sailor. Peter, in those days, the sailors didn't leave sight of land. There would no way would they go out in the open sea. So they would sail down the coast of Africa where they could get slaves, but they would keep land in sight. Columbus is the first one who went west and left land, which in those days was very courageous, very brave, very stupid.
Right, because they didn't even know if they would fall off the edge of the world, at that point.
Exactly right. The sailors, and then it was a little longer than he thought because, he didn't have any maps or anything. Well, he had sort of a crude map that he got in Spain, but the sailors became restless. And, in history, they were going to throw him overboard and all that, which is true. He had this wonderful pet parrot who spoke. And all the crew was assembling, and they were, let's get him now, let's do it now. And he comes out on the stoop, and he has the cabin boy Pedro bring the bird. He says, "Cover the bird and bring the bird out." So he does. So he couldn't put down the uprising. So he says, "Boy, bring me the bird." And he holds the cage up, and all the crew knew it was his pet bird. They used to make fun of him. And he says, "I'm going to open this cage and release this bird. You know how fond I am of this bird. If the bird comes out, we're going to see which way he flies. And I say instinctively, he will fly toward land. If the bird comes back, we know that he didn't find land. But if the bird never comes back, we found land. Will you give me 3 days?" Oh, they all talked about it. And the head sailor pops out and he says, "All right, you have 3 days. If that bird doesn't come back in 3 days, we're taking over this ship. We're throwing you overboard and we're going back to Spain." Bird never came back. And he managed to convince them that he was starting to see signs, weed in the water, flocks of birds flying over. He would tell them, "Look at the flock. These are land birds that are flying over us. They're not seabirds. They're coming from land."
Well, I can see why Columbus would be an intriguing character for you because, in the books the other books of yours that I've read, there is a character in the book named Ronnie who is very much like Christopher Columbus. Is like he can talk his way out of almost any jam, and he's you. And,
exactly right.
And so you're identifying with this guy who could figure out a way out of a tight jam. And so let's fast forward a little bit because that book is great for someone who really wants to get sort of some true history and historical information about the Columbus journeys, but also in an adventure story. You've got that all embedded together. And that's kind of what you did with these other stories. When I was reading them, I'm thinking to myself, how would I characterize these? Yeah, it's historical fiction. It's also almost like living in an alternative reality. It's like if the kids on the hill ran into a mafia guy, who was also a spy for the Soviets or whatever, what would happen? And so you kind of have this what if. I call it almost like living in an alternative reality, all based in a real place, in a unique place. And your Hill series, of which now you say there's 5 books. I'm just finishing my second one, so I'm ordering the other ones, and I want to see what happens to the kids. But it's the same cast of characters, real people. How did you get permission from these guys to be able to write about them and make up put words in their mouths, and
Right. Well, I used first
includes
name.
the police. You're talking about policemen.
Right.
There's the kids.
Right.
It's a whole cast of characters,
Yes.
and it reminds me of these movies I used to watch as a kid called the Bowery Boys.
Oh yeah, right.
Or the Dead End Kids, they call it, and they were all based in in the Bowery, Lower East Side of New York. But same idea. They're always getting in and out of trouble.
Right.
And how they got out of the trouble was what made the movie fun, and how they bust each other's chops all the time, and so there's like a similar pattern here.
Yeah, but the Bowery Boys didn't use the F word.
No, well, they couldn't get away with that. Probably in real life they did.
Growing up on the Hill, I had to use it because it was a staple part of our vocabulary.
Yeah, it was in every other word part of the vocabulary.
So I have a number of advisors who still live on the Hill, who I'll ask for information, like where did this woods lead to, or where was this? And so I asked these advisors, I said, should I use the F word? I said, and they said, that's the way we spoke. If you don't use it, it's not true to the form.
Authentic.
So I used it, but now I try to keep it at a minimum.
Yeah.
Because people don't want to read that all the time.
Well, they get the point after you've established the characters and how they're always busting each other's chops left and right.
Always busting, especially Pecker and Pete. Always busting. And so I wrote the called Dead Kids Don't Speak, because we witnessed the mafia killing.
Got that one right here. Yeah.
Right there. Dead Kids Don't Speak. And then the mafia saw us running away because we were in the trees eating cherries right by the house, so we could look right into the living room and bang, this guy killed this older couple. And it was like, oh my God, let's get out of here. And we've fallen out of the trees and we run for it. Well, they saw us. They saw us running, and they didn't know how much we saw or knew. So they sent a car. The next day, they sent a car after us to drive around the hill and find out who we were.
But is any of this part that you just described? Because I remember the tree. I remember the cherry tree. And where you situated it right there across from the baseball field where we all used to play.
Yeah.
But did any of this part did you actually witness a murder? Where you and the guys, or did you make that part up?
That's all made up. But the cherry trees are in that Joneses own the property there. So if you're standing on the softball field and the fence is right there, right across Mayor Rutherford Road was Jones's, and they had cherry trees. And we used to go there and pick them.
So that's kind of the cool part for me as somebody reading it, knowing the area. I don't know what it'd be like for somebody not from the area, although you describe it very well. But I knew exactly where you were talking about. I knew the guys themselves that are characters in the book. And I kept asking myself, did this really happen, or is he making it up? And it just gets wilder and wilder as the wilder it gets, the more I realize, oh my God, he's taking us on an imaginative journey where he's kind of saying, what if the guys on the hill ran into this situation?
Yes. And Peter, I have Pecker, Pete, and Mickey's voices forever in my head. I can lay in bed at night and hear them talking. So I can use that dialogue. Also, I live in South Philadelphia. Now, I don't know if you know much about South Philadelphia, but it used to be a strictly Italian neighborhood. And it's the seat of the Philadelphia Mafia. Angelo Bruno, who's in a couple of my books.
I remember. Yeah, I remember when I was a kid. He was the godfather of Philadelphia.
He lived 5 or 6 blocks from where I live today.
Mm.
So I've been here. Denise and I have been here 15 years. And I have in my head the way that people talk in South Philadelphia. Hey, yo, get over here. And because I've heard them for 15 years, and I like the mafia, because usually the mafia just kills each other. Unless you see something, then they'll kill you.
Right.
Then you better run for it. And back at this time in 1964, they did prostitution and they did numbers. They didn't do drugs. And I don't know if you remember the Godfather movie. that the reason Marlon Brando got assassinated, he survived it. But the reason he got shot was because he wouldn't go along with the drugs.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah. So even though the mafia kills each other here, they're kind of reasonable in what they get into. Today, I still don't think they get into drugs today, but I'm not sure. It's still here. It's underground now.
Yeah.
What killed the mafia? What killed the mob was the listening devices the FBI used.
Mm-hmm.
They could, if you watch The Sopranos, it's absolutely true. They could hear their conversations. That's what brought John Gotti down.
Yeah.
In New York, they listened to his conversations. So now the mob here in South Philadelphia is existing in a under the table kind of way, very, very carefully, but it's still here.
Yeah. But there's lots of mafias. There's the Irish mafia, which has a prominent role in your next book, Insomnia, which is the one I'm finishing up now, with a great colorful cast and leader. And there's the Russian mafia. There's so many different mafias that they kind of are fighting with each other all the time. It's amazing that any of us have any life at all when you got all these guys fighting around us.
Yeah.
But before we run out of time, I want to ask you. So you've written a series of books. We've got the books on the Hill, and the characters keep recurring. In each book, it seems like the adventures get even more outrageous than the one before. They're dealing with extraterrestrials in the third one, and there's and then there's dead bodies. Is the dead bodies? Is that the Hill book, the one with
yes, both Philadelphia Story and The Dead Business.
So they're all on the Hill. And this Hill, for people who don't know what we're talking about because you're not from Philadelphia, it's sort of this, it exists almost in a world of its own. It's like its own little kingdom right on the edge of the downtown Philadelphia and the main line, the sort of the old main line area of Philadelphia. And it's a picturesque little town. Right now, it's probably too expensive to move into now. Back then, it was working class. Now it seems like it's very hip and no longer just ethnic. In fact, I think there's a lot of Jewish people who live there now.
Oh, sure. It's very.
When I was a kid, if you were Jewish, you lived on the other side of Mary Watersford Road. You didn't live in the hill itself. Anyway, all of that thing. But I want to ask you, in terms of your own creative process, there's a lot of style in the book, in each of these books, that reminded me of different things. There was, like, for instance, I mentioned they sort of reminded me of the Bowery Boys in terms of the adventure side of it. But what about your literary influences? Because there are other writers who write in this very action-packed style. Like the first thought I had when I read Dead Kids Don't Speak is it reminded me a little bit of John Grisham's book, The Firm. Do you follow writers like that, and do you use them as inspiration?
Yes, I do. And I follow what Stephen King says about writing. Now, I'm not a big Stephen King fan. I think I read The Stand maybe and one of his other books. But what he wrote a book. It's called On Writing. Mm-hmm. And he talks about writing. And I love what he says about writing. And he says, if you don't read, then you're not improving as a writer. Mm-hmm. And that's very true. And you mentioned Chisholm. I love his books. I love his descriptions. I love his dialogue. And so I'll put down my computer and go and sit and read a couple of books I like. Uh-huh. It just it seems to fuel my creativity. Yeah. And a lot of things Stephen King said about writing. He said, if you're writing books to make money, he says, get the hell out and get a part-time job, because that's not the right reason. And he's exactly right. Now, do I want HBO to come along and say, hey, we'd like to buy your series for $1.5 million?
You wouldn't turn it down, right?
My kids?
Yeah.
Hell yeah, of course. But it's not what pushes me.
Yeah, especially because you're kind of coming into this literary genre right now, late in life, and while I'm really impressed with how well you've used your website and the internet to help kind of market it, but you're selling these books directly. You're publishing them directly with Amazon. So you're kind of, you have to use that same wily, uh, get out of get out of trouble, mentality that you talk about in the books to be able to market your own books. So
Yes.
you got to be as creative there as you can be in the writing.
Yeah, I tried going the traditional way and had a very bad experience with my Columbus book because I sent it to a well-known educational publisher in New York. And I knew when I sent the entire manuscript that was a big mistake. And I never heard back from him. But a friend of mine sent me an email and said, Ron, go check out this. I'm not going to mention any name. I don't want to get sued. Yeah. Go check out this book. It's very similar to your Columbus book.
Oh.
And a guy from a prominent university wrote it. And it's Columbus's first voyage, has Taino, and it's very, very similar.
Wow. Is it fiction or is it historical?
Historical fiction, right. And I've later since learned that this is what big publishers will do. They have writers. And instead of using your book, which there could be a lot of mistakes and everything in it, I don't doubt that, they'll contact one of their writers and say, take a look at this manuscript. And I think that's what happened to my Columbus book.
Oh, wow. And they pirated it from you.
Terrible, yeah. And if I wasn't afraid of getting sued, I'd send you the name of the book and you'd go in there. And if you read Darkness, you'd go in there and see how similar this book is.
Well, that's
could come up with that idea the same as I did. I just don't see how it could.
Well, it happens all the time, in the creative arts, is that people steal from each other, and sometimes they get caught and sometimes they get away with it.
Right.
Right. In music too, somebody writes a song and they've maybe even subconsciously borrowed a musical phrase that was a hit 25 years ago, and it bounces back on them later.
Right.
So you got to guard your work, is what you're saying, and keep it close to the vest until it's published and out there.
So let me add one more thing to that. The publishers will look at your book, look at your manuscript, and they'll say, we could publish this in 4 years. I don't want to wait 4 years. And we're going to take 60% of any proceeds you get. Thirdly, you have to guarantee bookstores that you will buy back any copies not sold. And that could be in the hundreds. That could be a lot of money.
Yeah.
I thought, this is it. I'm going to find out how to do this myself. And I published Catholic School General myself. Made a huge number of mistakes, but I learned. And then Darkness, I learned.
I think this is important for the people who are listening who have ambitions of their own and aspirations to write their own books, that the publishing option is no longer controlled by the major publishers. You now can do your own thing as long as as long as you're willing to do the marketing, because what publishers are supposed to be doing is all the grunt work and the marketing. Even though they don't, you end up even if the publisher does your book, you still have to go out there and promote it, but they can handle all the warehousing and all. So could you talk a little bit, for those who might want to go down this path, what some of the things you learned about the self-publishing path is?
Well, you can absolutely do it yourself, no doubt about it. You first have to write a manuscript, and this is what a lot of people don't. Every one of my books are 100,000 plus words. That's a lot of words, Peter.
Which translates to about 350 pages or so.
Yes, exactly. And so a person who wants to write a book is unaware, they might write 30,000. You can't publish a 30,000 word book.
Yeah.
It's got to be up there. And, the second thing is you have to proofread it. And this is where I made some mistakes, because proofreading is very expensive. Mm-hmm. And in order to get a good proofreader, you could pay $5,000 to $10,000. And I didn't want to spend that kind of money. Yeah. So my wife and other people proofread it. And so that seems to work for us, but it takes a long time.
Yeah.
So you have to get a proofreader. Then once you have a manuscript, once it's proofread, once it's long enough, there's a website called Fiverr.com, Fivrr, and it's people all over the world who will do things for you, things who will put your manuscript into a book script, who will do a cover for you, and the prices are unbelievable. So I can do a book today for about $500-$600.
Really?
Upload it on Amazon, get Amazon's approval. They have a lot of things you have to jump in step to. It's okay, it's their company. And put them on. For example, my 3-book series now, they won't put in a so you have to go on and order each book individually. And they just won't do it. So, okay, so I have to live with that. But so then once you upload it to Amazon, it's on Amazon, your book and about 90,000 other books. So who's going to find your book?
Yeah.
Nobody. Maybe your next door neighbor, or, I have a business card, says On the Hill Books, and has my website on it. But Facebook, okay? Facebook has groups. Don't know if you're aware of anybody's aware. You can create a Facebook group. There are thousands of Facebook groups, like how to fly a drone, or who grew up in Penn Valley. Have all these members.
Yeah, we have a mutual friend who has a website just like that, all about Lower Merion.
Exactly, Lower Merion. Right. So I created a book called Rank and File Readers, and I'm a big believer in the police and the job they have to do, and I respect them and like them. And sure, many of them make a mistake. That's the nature of the job. But that's why I call it Rank and File Readers. And I think there's now 363 members on it.
This is like a Facebook page or what?
It's a Facebook group.
Okay.
You could go on Facebook and you'll recognize a lot of the members, because a lot of them are from, like our one friend.
Yeah.
A lot of them are in there. But 2 years ago, someone hacked. I had over 1,000 Facebook friends, many of the people who bought books or made comments on my books. Someone hacked into my Facebook account and became dual ownership of my Facebook account. And Facebook wouldn't allow me to prove to them that I was the owner. So they deleted my site.
Oh, no.
Oh, it's terrible.
That's crazy.
I had to start all over again.
Holy cow.
So what that, a bad thing led to a good thing. What that made me do, someone told me, don't rely on your book on Facebook, because that's what happens. Build an email list. So I build an email list, and I'm adding to it all the time. And I'll be sending out my website to this email list.
How do people get on your mailing list?
Well, by Facebook, by word of mouth. And then on the mailing list, there is subscribe. You can go on here and subscribe. I'll get your email. And I say to people, do not worry. I will treat your email address like it's my own. I will not share it with anyone. I will not sell it. And of course I do. I'm very careful with a group of email.
So if somebody who's listening wants to get on that mailing list, who should they write to, or where?
Well, they just go on to my website. onthehillbooks.com. onthehillbooks.com.
onthehillbooks.com. onthehillbooks.com. We'll put it up there, after in editing later. onthehillbooks.com, and then contact you there, and then they can get on the mailing list.
Can you see this card? I don't know if you can see it.
So I can see it, and the people who are watching the video version can, but the people listening to the audio
I couldn't see it.
So it says www.onthehillbooks.com. And so that's really what you all need to know. Or you can go to get on the mailing list. Also, you can go to Amazon and just look up, is it Ronald Costello? How do they find you there?
Go on to Amazon and type in Ron Costello, Dead Kids Don't Speak, or just Ron Costello, author.
Okay, yeah,
You
and
find
that'll
me on
lead you to
Amazon.
all your books that are. So the other question I have for you, and this is really blows my mind, is that if someone wants to buy the digital version, it's only like 99 cents to buy one
I
of your
know.
books, and
I
it's
know.
only like 9.99 for a hard copy, which is what I got. And I'm thinking, who can afford to buy? You can't buy
I
books
know.
even at Costco for 9.99.
I know.
How can you make money in doing it? And does it work? Does the financial model work for you?
Well, it works for Stephen King because
It
he can
works,
sell
yeah,
Kindle books for whatever he wants. But
yeah.
Amazon will not let me increase the price of my either book, paperback or, for example, they just took Insomnia down to $6.50. It was at $11.50.
A hardcover. I paid $11.50. I paid full freight.
I know, but if you go on now, I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
they control it. So and I'm not complaining.
But so if they sell a book for you at Amazon, do you get a percentage of that, or
Yeah,
do you
they
get
get a small percentage of printing costs, and I get most of the money. That's correct.
Oh, you do. So you own
Yeah.
that. You own.
Yeah. Well, I'm not, not planning to go to live on the main line or anything.
Right,
But,
back
yeah,
you can't get back to Belmont Hills on that sale.
that's right.
Would you ever think about moving back to the hill?
Oh, I would love to own a home on a hill. If I was as rich as Stephen King or
Yeah,
John Chisholm, I should use him.
Grisham, you're talking about.
Grisham, I'm sorry. Uh, I
Yeah.
would own a house on the hill.
Yeah.
But I go there sometimes, just drive around.
Yeah. Well, every time I go back home to Philly, I revisit my old house on Green Tree Lane, and I drive down Jefferson Road, which is Jefferson Street, which is a prominent street in the books. I mean, it's like as I read these books, I feel like I'm being transported back to my childhood, and I can see the characters that are in the book. I can hear them, like you said. You can actually hear the voices still. So it's been great, kind of a nostalgia trip for me, as well as a great adventure read. I mean, the books are page turners. This is the reason I wanted to come on. If the books weren't any good, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The books are really fun to read. They're great reads. You're a natural born storyteller. I only wish I knew back then when we were kids, how imaginative and what a great storyteller you were, because I would have hung out with you a whole lot more. You were older than me, so I didn't get to see you that much, and I didn't play on the baseball team, which is where you put a lot of your energy. But I knew we would have known each other. We did interact a few times, although on the school bus mostly, and because we
I remember your name.
Your bus would pick up the hill kids first, and then it would come through where I lived, and pick us up along the way to high school. But so anyway, but I had no idea I always viewed you as kind of a quiet kid. You were like staying out of trouble.
But I schemed and did things behind the scenes that
you were the clever one. You were the guy in trouble and let all the other guys take the heat.
And all the girls were beautiful, as you remember.
Yeah.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And it was like Hollywood. We were
Yeah.
And we all ended up with mainline girlfriends. All four of us. That sort of evaporated soon after.
But having a mainline girlfriend was a recurrent theme in all of the On the Hill books. The guys were obsessed with having girlfriends, from the mainline. So
and I use a number of their names in the book.
And did you have to go back to get permissions from anyone?
Get permission. Yeah,
that's a lot of work right there. Well, listen, I'd love to keep this going, but we'll just have to have you come back another time, and maybe when the next book in the series, is available, and we can talk some more about it. I'd love but I advise people who are listening to check out either, go to Amazon and buy a book there. I guess that's still your best price, or can you order directly from your website?
No, they can't. They can order at Amazon through my website, but not directly to me. I'm not.
So if they order through Amazon, if they order through your website to Amazon, do you get an additional partnership?
No.
So go to either Amazon or to Ron's website and check it out. Read. Okay. I don't know, where should they start? Should they start with the
Dead Kids? Yeah, Dead Kids.
Yeah, Dead Kids Don't Speak. Introduce the characters, and and that's the On the Hill series. But then if you're
Right.
interested in the historical stuff like Columbus, then that's another. What's the name of the Columbus book?
Darkness they could not see.
Darkness.
So I would really appreciate it. I'll send you a copy, Peter, if you want. I really appreciate if you read that and told me what you think.
I'd love to read.
Yeah. Can I just say one more advertising thing?
Absolutely.
They say that laughter builds your immune system, right? You heard that?
Yes.
The Dead Business. People ought to read it going into the winter because it will really build their immune system. The four of us get into this business with a mob of stealing bodies. And you can read the excerpt that's on the website now of us delivering one of the bodies to the cemetery that was still alive.
Wow. Well, and the name of that book is called Dead Bodies.
The Dead Business.
The Dead Business. The Dead Business. And that's part of the Hill series. And I'll mention it if you see one that you want to read first, you don't have to read them in order.
No, not at all.
To get the gist of it. I'm going to read them in order because I love the progression. But you can start anywhere because the characters come alive and they're reinvented in front of you each time in each book. So know that these guys are real. They really exist. And although they've been placed into unique situations where they've got to then fend for themselves in the literary world, so you created an alternative universe in which you and your friends live and carry on and get into all sorts of wild mischief and adventures. And
in my mind, that's correct.
In your mind, yeah. And I congratulate you on doing all this and having fun. It feels like you've kind of have a whole new, I call it the Act 3 phase of your life here, where you're going to be cranking out books like John Grisham and Stephen King, because
I hope so.
You seem to be enjoying the process.
I must also tell you that my wife deserves a lot of credit. She always pushed me to write. And she became the proofreader, and she's tough. I don't think you should use this word. Well, I want to use the word. No, you can't use this word, this kind of stuff. And so she should probably be co-writer. She doesn't write anything. She just proofs it and advises.
Certainly is acknowledged and should be acknowledged in every book because our wives are our toughest critics when it comes to,
Absolutely.
Because they want to protect us from embarrassing ourselves.
And then
of course. So we'll thank Denise for us. I've never have gotten to meet Denise because she's not from the Hill, right? She didn't grow up.
Not from the Hill.
Met her later, but I look forward to meeting you guys when I come to Philly. Maybe we can meet somewhere and get some wine and
absolutely
get to know each other. And anyway, I'll send you by email the mailing address, and I look forward to reading the Columbus book. And keep cranking them out because I'm having fun reading them. One of my favorite authors currently is Daniel Silva, who writes these spy novels, and I'm kind of running out of. I've read through almost all of his books, and I'm going, what am I going to read next? I've got a new series now to keep me busy. So and thanks so much for taking me on that journey, and keep them coming, Ron.
All right, Peter, I appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you, Ron Costello, On the Hill series. And others and other books still to come. Pretty soon, maybe you could catch up to Grisham and Stephen King if you keep cranking them out at the rate that they do.
That'd be nice.
Have a great week, and thank all of you for joining us today on an unusual Pizza Quest. Oh, wait, one final thing before we leave. Pizza. This is a Pizza Quest. You mentioned a pizza place in either Manayunk or Roxborough that I didn't remember that does tomato pies. In there, you and I both used to go to Mama's. We know Mama's Pizzeria, because that was close to where both of us live. But you knew of some on the other side in over the river in Manayunk or Roxborough. What was the name? Do you remember the name of the place?
Yeah, you're really testing me, my memory here, but I believe
it's mentioned in Insomnia.
Consolus.
Yeah. Is it Consolus?
People from the old country, Italian. They had that fire oven, and you could get pizza and bread. Consolus. I'll find out for sure.
When you mentioned tomato pies, I mean that's really a Philly Jersey thing, and so while we have Mamas in common, I didn't know about Consoles, and I wish I did when I was a kid.
Yeah,
that was a probably place. Doesn't even exist anymore, right?
And there was also Del Sandro Steak Shop.
Yeah, right. Famous steak shop.
That's still there. That's still there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, if you get two guys from Philly together, they can spend 5 hours just talking about cheesesteaks and hoagies. So,
Yes, we could. Yes, we could. Thank you.
We'll have another episode devoted strictly to cheesesteaks, hoagies, and pizza, and we can compare notes that way as well.
Okay. Thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Take care. Thanks for joining us, and thank all of you. And we'll see you on the next episode of Pizza Quest.
Pizza Quest is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.